Alright guys, so today we're doing a chain and sprocket replacement on a Honda CBR600RR. This process is going to be virtually identical on every year CBR600, and it's almost an identical process to changing any chain and sprockets on any Japanese superbike, sport bike ever made. So I'm going to walk you through this start to finish, explain everything that you need to do, all the tools that you'll need. I'm going to make this as fast and easy as possible. This is something that you can do yourself at home in about an hour's time. So I think without further ado, let's rip into it. And my name's Micah, welcome to the channel. So first off, just a little info on chain and sprockets. So how will you know that you need to replace your chain and sprockets? Well, there's a couple different ways. The first one is that on your rear swing arm, you'll have notches of where that axle bolt should be. You space that back further backwards to keep your chain tension taut. Well, if you have reached the end of that adjustable area, that is the sign that your chain is completely done for. You're gonna need a new chain and sprockets. Now, another way that you'll know that you need to replace your chain and sprockets, and this is the one that I'm dealing with here, is that your chain is just improperly worn. You've got some loose spots and tight spots in it. So when I have the rear of this bike up in the air, I have it on a stand, I can tighten that chain, and in one area I can get the chain to the right tension, but then if I turn the wheel, as that chain turns, I'll get to an area where the chain is just rock solid. It's way too tight. And then if I keep turning it, then the chain is twice the slack that it should be. And that is something that you'll typically find more often with just cheaper chains. And so that's what we're dealing with here. We have a very low quality chain on this. That's what it came with when I inherited this bike. Now, another thing when it comes to chain and sprockets is you don't ever just want to replace the chain. You will always replace the chain and the sprocket together as one. If you put a new chain on worn sprockets, those worn sprockets are just going to wear out your new chain much faster. And if you use an old chain with new sprockets, that old worn chain is going to eat away at the teeth of your new sprockets much quicker. So they always need to go hand in hand. Always do both of them together. And then lastly, when it comes to chains, you're going to see a couple different types of chains out there. Most typically O-ring and X-ring chains. Now, the difference between the two has to do with the little rings that are on the links of that chain. O-ring chains just have a standard round little rubber washer, packed in there between those links. X-ring chains, that little O-ring, that little rubber is going to be an X shape. So the advantages to the X-ring over the O-ring is that the X-rings, you're going to get more performance out of them. There is less friction there than an O-ring chain. X-ring chains also last much longer. Typically, people say they last about twice as long. On top of that, those X-shaped rings are going to hold in your grease, they're going to hold in your chain lube much better, and they resist the dirt, the debris, the crud that you're going to encounter as you're riding around. So you're probably like, oh, why wouldn't everybody just get an X-ring chain? Well, the one advantage that O-ring chains have over X-rings is that O-rings, they're cheaper. That is it. That is the only thing. O-ring chains are cheaper. But with all the benefits you get from X-ring chains, longevity, better performance, less maintenance, it's just a no-brainer. Always get an X-ring chain for your motorcycle. So of course, that is what I have here today. And then when you're looking around for chain and sprockets, I always buy them as a set because I always go with the factory gearing on almost every motorcycle out there. There is very few bikes that I would differ from factory gearing on. So when getting a chain and sprocket set, well, and I always get them online too, specifically Amazon or eBay. These I got off Amazon. There's going to be basically 3 different grades of chains and sprockets. The low grade, the mid grade, and then a high grade. The low grade, the cheapest ones you can find, you're going to find chain and sprockets for your bike complete set, probably $40, maybe $50 $50 for everything. So very, very cheap, right? The mid-grade sets are gonna come in around $100. And these are much better. They're much better quality. You know, once you get to the mid-grade, that's when you'll start to see X-ring setups. Typically, all of the cheapest ones out there are just an O-ring. Some of them don't even have rings. It's just metal on metal links. Specifically, the Caltrick brand, you're gonna see those Caltrick chains on Amazon and eBay. Stay away from those. Do not be lured in by the cheap price and all the fancy colors. Seriously, I have tried those out before, and within 100 miles, I have that uneven stretching and wearing on my chain already. They're totally worthless. Don't get them. Now, for the high grade, you know, you're gonna see brands like that Vortex, and I'll just probably say Vortex is, I think, the best quality chain and sprockets you could ever get, but along with that fantastic quality comes a higher price point. So those are gonna be in between the $200 to $300 mark for your set. So what I have here, I settled on a mid-grade brand. I paid $90 for my chain and sprockets all together. It is that X-ring. I believe I got our chain in gold. And of course, I'll put a link in the video description to the exact chain and sprockets that I got here. Okay, now we'll begin. Now for this process, you are gonna need a rear motorcycle stand. This doesn't have to be a fancy stand. I mean, ours is a pit bull stand, so that's like the nicest one you can get. But I got this free with a motorcycle that I purchased one time. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have ever gone out and bought this. But they sell rear motorcycle stands on Amazon. They're pretty decently priced. I feel like you can get one for 40, 50 bucks. It's something that you'll have and use forever. I'll put a link to those as well. And so how this works, it's gonna lift your bike up from your rear swing arm spools. You've got a spot on each side of the swing arm for these spools. If you don't have any spools, you'll need some. I'll put a link to some. I got these for $9. Now we're gonna do just one thing before we put the bike on the stand, and that is loosen up the rear axle bolt. Typically those are on with about 100 foot-pounds of force, so I always like to loosen that as the bike's on the ground before it's up in the air. Just seems like a safer idea. So here I have a 2010 CBR600RR, and the rear axle nut size is gonna be a 32. That's not gonna be a socket size that everybody has. I'll put a link to one on Amazon or something. I'm sure they're like, you know, 10 bucks. But like I said, this is stuff you'll have forever. And we'll just loosen it a little bit. We don't need to take that off or anything, just break it loose. All right, so now we can put our bike on that stand. Now this is certainly an easier process when you have somebody helping you, but we do not. So the goal here is to not drop your motorcycle. So kind of what I do, I get a very firm hold. You know, I reach over and I grab that passenger foot peg bracket. So I have a nice hold on the bike, and then I'm just gonna slide this stand under, and I'm kind of watching where it touches that spool on my side. So then I'll look over the bike. Yep, I'm on that one as well. So then I just start to push down, and then I don't really have to hold the bike anymore once I have that stand locked in. And then we just push it down. The bike comes up and back. Ta-da! Now I do have an aftermarket fairing kit on our bike, and so the side fairings, they completely cover the side of the case. I forget if the stock fairings will cover the front sprocket cover or not. So you may or may not have to do this part and remove this side fairing. And then just a basic toolkit is gonna be able to do everything that we need to do. If you do not have a toolkit, I would highly recommend one very similar to mine. I'll put a link to one on Amazon in the video description. They're about 90 to 100 bucks, and I do everything with this baby. Golly, do they got enough bolts in there? I mean, I guess these things do get up to blistering speeds, so you want to make sure these fairings don't fly off. All right, so slide everything out of here. There we go. And then I'll gently put my kickstand back up. Try not to scratch our fairing at all. Alrighty, so now we have good access to that front sprocket cover that's gonna be right here. And then I'm just gonna leave all these little fairing bolts just kind of on the ground right here, so I kind of know exactly what spot all of these go back in. And then I'll give you a front row seat right there. So the first thing you're gonna wanna do in this whole process, we need to loosen the front sprocket. And the only way to do that is while the chain is still on it, so that we can hold that sprocket in place. Otherwise the sprocket will just turn when we put a wrench on it. And you never want to torque against that front sprocket nut that locks it in there when it's in gear. So our bike is totally in neutral here. That's the way you're going to want to keep it. Those sprocket nuts on the front can typically be on fairly tight, and if you torque against your transmission thinking that that will hold the sprocket in place, you could grenade the transmission on your motorcycle. So our shift linkage here is going to be in the way. Now on the shift linkage stud here, there's going to be a little dot right here. Let me bring you in there so you can see it, but if you see on that stud, there's just one little dot, and it's right at the opening there, that crease of this linkage. But that is for reference, letting you know exactly how that linkage needs to be positioned and how it will go on there. So we're just gonna loosen the locking bolt that's up top. It's just a 10mm, and you'll take that completely out because there is a groove on that stud that this bolt fits through, locking it in there. So you can't just loosen it to get that off. It needs to be completely out. Once it's completely out, typically you can wiggle these back and forth and pull them off. If for any reason you couldn't wiggle that and get it off of there, what you could do is put a straight screwdriver just in between that gap and just barely pry it a little bit, and then that should open it enough that you can just slip it right off. And I'll show you, there is that groove on that stud there that bolt goes through. That's why that needs to be out. Now this linkage we can just set on down and let it hang down there. I'm just gonna put that bolt right back in the linkage so we don't lose that. Oh, so let's look at our cover here and see how many bolts we have on it. For sure one here, one down below, and of course we've got all of our little drain tubes and stuff that are gonna be right in the way of everything. Well, maybe it is just the 2 bolts that hold that on there. I guess we'll know when we take out those 2 bolts. Well, and then a longer extension here is just gonna help me out that I can get to these a lot easier. And each of these bolts here, I can see a little cable holders on them, so those will come out with our bolts. There's one out, and you can see that little metal cable holder. It's wrapped in rubber. That's just kind of what holds those drain tubes and stuff in place. Oh yeah, it's totally just those 2 bolts there, so that's nice. Sometimes these front sprocket guards, you know, depending on what bike you're working on, you know, I think the Ninjas and stuff might have 3 or 4. Yamahas, I think, are 3 or 4 as well. And then your Suzukis, well, you shouldn't have bought a Suzuki. Kidding. Kind of, not really. And then those 2 bolts are exactly the same, so it doesn't matter. You know, you don't have to keep those separate from one another. So now you've got your coolant lines here coming from your water pump, but I think we'll be able just to cleverly wiggle this thing out of there. Well, I'll just take both of those drain tubes out of the way there. All right, so if you come straight out, and then slip her in between. Ooh, and those are always nice and greasy because they catch all of the chain lube and dirt and everything that you drive through. All right, so there is the next contender on The Price is Right. That bolt right there. All right, so now how you're gonna wanna hold this in place so that that chain doesn't move, so that we can actually loosen that sprocket bolt with your wheel having spokes on it with a bar or a board of some sort. You could just slip it through over the swing arm just like that, and then your wheel, as it spins forward, once it comes to those spokes in the wheel, it's gonna lock in and hold you in place just like so. Now if you use some bar, like we are a metal bar, I would put some rags or something around that so that it doesn't scratch up your wheel at all. So that's what I'm gonna do right now. I wonder if I can just kinda that's gonna work perfect. Woo! Slide that back in there, and then spin the wheel forward. till that spoke locks against it. That is so perfect. Well, and what size is that? It looks like maybe a 13, 14. All right, so it looks like that is a 14 there. Oh yeah, the other way you could do that, if you don't have a bar or if you don't have a board, something to put in there and lock that wheel. If you have a body nearby, what they could do is press on the rear brake on the other side of your bike, and that should be enough pressure. Have them press on that as you break this bolt free. You will have them do that again as you are tightening this bolt. If you have no bar, no board, and no buddy, you could sit on the motorcycle yourself as you hold the rear brake, then with your hands you could try and bust this free. That starts to get into experimental risky territory, so I would definitely recommend the other two methods first. But I tell you what, I have done it all. Alright, let's see how tight this is on here. If it's really tight and I'm having trouble breaking this free, I'm just gonna get my impact. An impact gun just breaks these free, no problem. Man, that is just on there rock solid. So, we'll go to a bigger ratchet now. And if I still don't feel great about it, we will use the impact. Golly. We're going to the impact. We are going to the impact. So this red chain, what I'll say, this red chain is not the factory chain. Those are the factory sprockets. So the previous owner did that no-no that we talked about, just replacing the chain, not the sprockets. So that's probably the reason that that sprocket is on there, that bolt is on there so tight. It should have been taken off, it should have been replaced, it never was. Now things are getting serious. And I hate impacts because it always makes me look like such a weakling. They work so well. Yep, just like that, it's busted free, which I'm not a weakling. Okie dokie. All right, so now we can take our bar back out of that swing arm and wheel. So at this point now I can take the chain off. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna spin this chain around until I find the master link on it. And I always like to work with clip style links. I'll move you over here quick. Oh, here it is right there. But a clip style master link, those are just easy to do yourself, to install, to get on. They're very easy to take them off yourself. If for some reason you are stranded in the middle of nowhere, broken down, or there was some problem that you needed to take your chain off your motorcycle, you can do these yourself with just a needle nose pliers. So if you've never seen one of these, I'll give you a look here. So it just looks like every other link, but then you get this little locking part on it there. So one end is going to be open and it kind of clamps around one of those studs, and then the other end you can see that it has a bigger part in there, so you slide it over the stud and then it slides that way. Now these master link clips will always be put on with the open end facing backwards. You always want this chain to spin with that closed end going forward. So with the needle nose, what I'll do is put one of my little prongs here on the back side or front side of this stud, and then with the other part I'll just press on the back of that clip, and that should push it forward and off of there. Yep, just like that. So and then you can slide it out, boom, our link is off. See how easy that was? So then we can just push that link through. Sometimes you'll need a little straight screwdriver, or maybe I can press on it with my needle nose here. Yep. So then we'll take the outside face off, and then you've got your two little rubber rings. One of them fell off. It's not like we're saving them. Pull that link through the back side there. Maybe wiggle it a little bit. Okay, it came off. So there is the other part of our link. So now with that off, then our chain comes undone. So we're just gonna pull this on through here. Make sure it doesn't drag against our swing arm, or scratch anything up. All right, there we are. Our chain is completely off of our motorcycle. That's going straight in the trash. Or sometimes what you can do with those, actually, what I'm gonna do with that, sometimes those old chains can be, especially when it's in a different color or something, You could do like a garage project or do some cool thing, hang it up. It's kind of cool to have on the wall in like a manly man's garage or a man cave. Okay, so at this point, well, I can probably just take that front sprocket completely off of there. Now keep in mind, sometimes, not specifically for Hondas, this one looks identical on both sides, but some motorcycles, your front sprocket is going to be directional, same with the rear, so you'll want to keep in mind what direction that needs to go on your front sprocket stud. Yeah, and we've definitely got wear on these teeth. We've got divots, you know, on the side of them and everything that have been wearing in. Yeah, so maybe that chain wasn't even put on these sprockets too long ago, but like I said, you put a new chain on old sprockets, it eats through them. So now we can go about removing the rear wheel out of the bike so that we can get that rear sprocket off then. So we'll just take that sprocket nut completely off now. So, and then behind this nut, you're gonna have a washer. You're gonna have that axle block. Whoop. So take those all off, know what order those came off in, and then we can kind of push that axle out a little bit, just enough that I can then grab it on the other side. So then I'll lift up with one hand, I kind of put it through the wheel, I support the wheel, and then I will pull this right on out of there. Ooh, a little rusty. We'll grease that up and clean it up as well. Well, and then I want to show you something on this other side here. Before I do this, so you can still see it. So your brake rotor here, it goes in the caliper, and then there's a little bracket here, and the axle bolt goes through that. So I'll kind of pull this out with my wheel, and then up off of the rotor. You set that to the side there, and then your wheel comes out. Well, and so I'll give you a better look at this. So this little square, this little spot right there, that little rectangle that you see, so on the inside of your swing arm, you can see the slot right there that will go in. So as we're putting this wheel back on, you know, we'll kind of have this over the rotor, and we kind of slide it all in just the way that we took it out. Sometimes you can kind of fight with those a little bit to find that exact slot where that needs to go. But you'll see as we put this back on, I'll kind of show you the best and easiest way to do that. So hopefully you're not fighting with it too much. Well, okay, so now we have our rear wheel completely out. It's on the ground here, so I can easily get to these nuts here. We're gonna loosen all those up, and then we'll pull the rear sprocket off. We'll put our new one right on there. Well, and so as I'm removing these, oh my goodness, those are on there so tight. But as we're taking these out, I'll address one comment that I see on the channel more than anything else, and it's, where's your ZX6R? Why did you get a CBR over the ZX6? Well, because I did like every possible video I could think of on a ZX6R. I mean, we did initial review, we did rides, we did all of your maintenance for fluid or chain, cable adjustments. We did aftermarket stuff, exhaust, tunes. I mean, I did top speed videos, acceleration videos. What was there left? Like what? I got to the point where it's like, I don't know what other videos I could possibly make on this motorcycle. Not that the ZX6 is a bad motorcycle. I loved my 2024 very much. In the black on black, man, that was like one of the best looking rockets I've ever had. But we gotta keep working and keep riding on stuff, you know? We wanna expand our horizons. I wanna expand your horizons. And the CBRs are a great 600 as well. I've always liked them. So that is the reason. You finally got it out of me, kids. Everybody probably thought it was going to be some crazy revelation like, oh, now he hates Kawasaki or the ZX6Rs. Nope, they are thoroughly awesome, but so are CBRs, 600s and 1000s. All right, so with all of our nuts off, and then we do have a washer on each of those as well. Wiggle this. Whoop. Take all my washers off here as well. Yeah, the teeth on this are just getting worn as well, you know, they're just getting cupped out, and then the sides, you can see the tops are wearing a little. So we were definitely due. So now let's bust out the new stuff. All right, so there is our brand new sprocket. And like I said, I'm just going with factory sprocket sizes. I think I said that. If I didn't, I'm saying it now. And then with like a clean rag, a brush, maybe some clean cleaner of some sort, you always want to make sure that this area around here on the rear hub is going to be nice and clean, that new sprocket is going to sit on there perfectly level and flush. What I'll also say is that on this rear sprocket, you're going to have one side that is flat, one side has a recession. That recession is going to go to the outside. So and then we can put a washer back on each of those studs and then put a nut on each one. I'll just start those. Now when you're tightening these nuts up on your rear sprocket, we're gonna go kind of in a crisscross pattern. You're always gonna wanna tighten one a little, tighten the one exactly opposite, and that's the kind of method you're gonna wanna use so that you can tighten this thing down equally. You know, we don't wanna tighten one down as hard as we can because that sprocket could be spaced up a little bit then and it won't be perfectly straight or perfectly flat on that face, and that will be noticeable when you're riding. The bike will have a totally wonky feel. Tighten one down just until it grabs that face a little bit. I did not cinch that down very tight at all. Go to the other one until it grabs this face. Opposite that, and then we're gonna keep doing our random crisscross pattern with that. And once I get them all kind of seated against the face of that sprocket, then I'm gonna fully torque them all. All right, everything's on there. Sprocket feels tight. So now torque one, go directly opposite from it, continue the crisscross, and that's a wrap, baby. All right, so now we'll just put that front sprocket right on our shaft there. We'll just slip that in. There we go. We can put our bolt back in, you know, and remember it has that big washer on it there. And all I'm gonna do for this right now is just get it finger tight. You know, obviously there's no way for us to torque this because there's not even a chain on the bike of any sort yet. So that is perfect right there. Well, and so now before we put that rear wheel back in, we're gonna wanna loosen up our adjusting bolts for the rear axle because we're putting a new chain on that is not all stretched out and improperly worn. So no doubt we're gonna have to have our adjusters further in. So these are just a size 12 and a size 10, I believe. So you loosen up the lock nut there. We'll spin that out a little bit, and then we just turn the adjuster bolt in. And we just needed the one wrench for that one because then our adjuster bolt can easily spin in by hand. If it was being a little difficult, you know, you could put your 10mm wrench on there. Well, so that should be enough right there. So I'll do the exact same thing to the other side. All right, so now, like I said, we're just gonna clean up that axle bolt a little bit because that baby was getting real bad. So I'm gonna wipe off all that dirt and crud and stuff on there, and then you can see on our axle shaft there is a little bit of rust and stuff like that. So we're gonna hit that with a WD-40 to take off that rust and penetrate that. Give her the old spritzy spritz. Wait about 10 seconds. Sure, that should be good. Oh yeah, it's gonna take that right off of there. All right, so now that axle bolt is good and clean, so with some fresh grease here, we'll just lube it back up. Drop my glove. I'm always liberal with the grease. I mean, you don't want big globs anywhere, so I put enough that I can wipe it all over that axle bolt. Then I just kind of wrap my finger around, pull the excess off. That's probably good. Boop. All right, so then I can just set this straight up. I'll leave that on the left side of our bike there. And so now we will go get prepared to put our rear wheel back in. Now, something I'll always do here is before I attempt to put this all back together with just a straight screwdriver, I put it in between those two disc brake pads and I just turn that to the side a little bit and it pushes that plunger, that piston down in there. I want to make sure that I have plenty of space in there that I can easily slip that on the rotor. If you don't do that, sometimes you'll fight with that and you will not be able to get this back on those rotors because those pads will just not open up or be at the right angle. But if you just put that in there and turn a screwdriver to the side, That is perfect. It presses that plunger in. You'll have all the space in the world. You wanna work easy, not hard. All right, I'm gonna try and give you the best view of this that I can, but at some point I'm not gonna have enough hands to switch the camera to this side and to that side, but I'll walk you through anything I'm doing on that other side. But with the rotor and then this caliper being on the right side, there's gonna be a little bit more action. This is kind of where you'll be focusing your attention. And this is easy to do this without having the chain in the way. You've noticed that we haven't taken the chain out. We haven't put that on yet. So make sure your axle spacers are in the sides of your wheel there, and those may get knocked out, you know, if you clip them on the swing arm, sometimes it'll knock those out. So be conscious of that. But so what I'll do with my left hand, I'm just gonna reach through the wheel and I'm gonna hold it like that, and then I'll kind of be using my abdomen or even my crotch, I guess, to kind of be pushing this wheel forward and getting it to where I need it. And then with my right hand, I'm just working the caliper. So I'm gonna have that caliper kind of up and ready here. So I'm gonna lift that wheel up, make sure that I don't hit my spacer and clip that off. And then we'll slide that caliper over the rotor, just like that. Slide it down, make sure it's on the outside of our spacer. Okay, we're good there. So now we're gonna pull out, and then we're gonna look, and you can kind of look over this caliper and line it up with that slot, you know? We're about lined up. Yep, okay. It went into its spot there, so now I'll switch hands with my right hand. I'm holding the wheel. Left hand is free, so that's when I'll take that axle bolt, and then I'm gonna push that through. You know, I'll kind of adjust my wheel, make sure the hole of the hub is lined up with the hole in the swing arm. Okay, got that side in. So I'm just gonna push that all the way through until I feel it stop. Okay, I felt it stop, so now it's probably hitting this caliper in some place, so I'll make a slight adjustment there. Okay, I felt it get past the caliper, and I'm making sure that my block on the other side, you know, for adjusting your chain is positioned correctly. It is, so I'll keep pushing this through, and I'm looking, yep, making sure that I'm lined up with the swing arm. So you saw our axle bolt come through, and at this point, I take a deep breath out, the victory sigh. So, and then you can put everything back on there. So our block on this side, we'll throw that washer back on, and then we'll give our axle nut a few threads to make sure that that is held on there and staying in place. So that's perfect. Now I'll push the wheel all the way forward here. Yep, so it's against those adjusting bolts so that I know I'll have plenty of slack when I put on our new chain right now. All right, so here we've got our new, well, maybe I won't be able to get that open. Ugh. All right, so we've got our new chain here. So these bikes always came with a 525 chain. So as far as chain numbers go, the higher the number, the thicker, more heavy duty the chain is. Now, I'm sure you've heard some people convert their sport bikes, you know, if it came with a 525 chain or a 530 chain, some people convert them to a 520. So you would need 520 size sprockets and then a 520 size chain. Now, a 520 chain is gonna be lighter than a 525. And you'll see people do this, they think, you know, it's to like get better acceleration, more top speed, whatever. A lighter grade, a smaller, thinner chain is gonna wear faster, and you're going to be adjusting it more. I do not like the idea of going with lighter duty chains, or the idea of them wearing faster or me having to turn wrenches more often, but you'll see some of the goons out there doing it. Whatever, to each their own. And this chain even came with lubricating oil, but we're not gonna use that. I've got my own chain lube and wax that I'll show you guys here. We'll do at the end. It's really good stuff. Well, and so we actually, with this chain, we got 3 different master links. So one's gonna be a rivet style, and then it came with 2 clip style. So I guess that's kind of interesting. That's kind of nice. You know, I don't know why I need 3. I guess it's nice to have the option between the clip style and rivet style. Like I said, I'm always gonna do that clip style. It's so easy. So to put this chain on here, what I'm gonna do is just kind of string it out there all the way. So I run that chain out just kind of behind the bike like so, and then I'll slip it over the rear sprocket. We get it into some teeth. Make sure everything's nice and straight back there. And then I'm just running this forward and passing it through. Bring it up. Okay, we're almost to the front sprocket. So then once I get to the front sprocket, well, I'll move you up here with me now. So I'm kind of gonna hold this so it wraps around that front sprocket and then shoots out the bottom. I'm probably gonna have my hands in there enough that you can't really see it too much. Sometimes it works nice to just grab that sprocket, kind of turn some teeth. So we completely wrapped around the sprocket there. So now I can grab the chain underneath, pull it enough that then I can grab it with my right hand behind the frame there. It's perfect. Now I can move you back. All right, so we'll keep some tension on the rear of that chain so everything finds its home. So now you can see I kind of wrapped the last part of that chain around the sprockets there. So I'm gonna hold those with my hand so everything stays, the chain stays in the teeth on the front sprocket and it stays in the teeth on the rear sprocket. Push my chain up on there and then I roll the split up to the back. Right there. So now our new chain is fully wrapped around our new sprockets. So what you're gonna do, you have the first part of your link. So you put one of your rubber rings on either side of it like so. And so that part we will push through the back of our chain here. Perfect. And then we can put two more of the rubbers on these studs. So with those two rubbers on, then you can put your finishing plate. I think I'm gonna use a channel locks. We're barely on there. So I've got that finishing plate just held on there a little bit, but I'm still gonna need to pinch this more so I can get my final clip around there because I don't have the little recessions that this slips into, those little grooves, exposed yet. That baby is gonna be a bugger. Oh, maybe the channel locks will work actually. Got the top on. You're kind of pressing this equally, you know, the top and the bottom, the front and the back. So like at first I was pressing just barely on the edge with the channel locks, kind of get that part in, and then I moved it way past, then I press on the back side. So now I've got those grooves exposed and it's kind of holding in place. Basically what you have to do is get those X-rings to expand and go over those center studs, or I guess holes that are in the chain. We've got enough clearance here now. So with my needle nose, I'm just gonna put one side on the back of that clip and then the front prong on my needle nose I put behind that back stud, and we're just gonna swiftly click this on there firmly. There it is. Just like that, kids. Yep, everything is absolutely perfect there. So now there's still three things that we need to do for this chain and sprockets. We can't forget that our front sprocket bolt is not tightened yet. Our chain is totally loose here. And then our axle bolt is just finger tight. That is not tightened either. So the order that we're gonna go through these, we are gonna adjust our adjuster bolts on the rear axle there so that we can get our chain to the proper tension. Once that's to the proper tension, then I will tighten the front sprocket bolt. Once that is tightened, I will check everything over again before we tighten our axle bolt to the factory spec, that, 100 foot-pounds. And then the factory spec on slack that I'm looking for here is 1 3/8 of an inch. It actually says it right there on the chain guard there. If you ever forget that, you can always look right there. All right, and that feels perfect right there. Give it a spin, make sure everything looks good. We'll feel it again in a random spot. Same slack, feel it again, same slack, feel it again, same slack. All right, so now we are gonna go back in with our rod here. And these CBRs, it's really easy because the swing arm, now you could go under the swing arm if you're working on a sport bike that doesn't have kind of a split swing arm, but these CBRs, they have this split swing arm, so you get a groove here, so you can always just put your rod right there. Otherwise, you'd be, to take it off, I guess you'd have your rod above the swing arm, To put it back on, you'd have your rod below the swing arm. All right, so while I may have taken that axle bolt out with an impact, in no scenario will you ever put a bolt back in anything on any vehicle with an impact. That is a 1,400 foot-pound impact. You do not want your front sprocket bolt in with 1,400 foot-pounds. So I will just use my 1/2-inch drive ratchet here on an extension. We're gonna spin this wheel until we get that spoke to come up and lock against our bar here. She's locked in, okay. So we'll just get this good and tight. That feels good right there. And so these will actually even tighten up as you're driving. So the physics of this, as that front sprocket turns, you know, it is gonna make that bolt even tighter. And that's part of the reason that I needed an impact to get it off initially, because whatever torque it was put on with, just the bike running, adding miles to it, it does cinch those bolts down even more. At this point, I'll put my cover back on. So let's see, the exact same way that we came off, you'll weasel in from the side and then you push straight over. All right, so and then I'll get my bolts with my little tube holders on them. Finish them out with my ratchet here. Don't get crazy with these. This is an 8mm bolt. You know, you don't want to break these off. All right, so I can thread those 2 drain tubes back in. And actually, at some point in this motorcycle's life, these drain tubes got threaded down the wrong way, so I'm gonna put them in the correct way now. All right, there is one. Perfection. I can bend my little tube holder around those. Now we can hook our linkage back up here. So we move this back up around, and remember that dot that I said there that we're gonna line up with the crack here, that little split. So you'll just perfectly line that up with those splines. Spot on. We put our bolt back in. Might need to push it forward or backwards until you find the spot there. Okay, that's it. So you can tighten that down by hand, and then we'll put our 10mm ratchet back on it. Don't get crazy with this one either. It's just a small bolt. Good and tight there is perfect. That looks awesome. We can put our kickstand back down because we'll need that down to put on our lower side fairing piece again. And of course, I'll wait until our motorcycle is back on the ground before I torque that rear axle nut back to that higher torque spec, just for safety and stability's sake. So now let me get my fairing piece and I'll put that back on. All right, so everything's back together. I made my final adjustments on that chain tension. I've got it exactly where I want. So before I put the bike on the ground, we'll do one last thing, and that's lube our new chain. And this stuff is the best possible chain lube, chain wax, chain protectant you could possibly get. It's this DuPont chain savers. So you can get this stuff on Amazon. Sometimes some Walmarts will have it. It's the exact same price on Amazon as it is in Walmart, but it's a wax-based lubricant. So it's just kind of a perfect all-in-one. So it's an aerosol can. You just give it a little shake, and then it does have a little precision tube that comes with it. I don't even think that we'll use that. I typically don't. So, and then I put a couple rags underneath in case we get any drips, but all I'm gonna do is just lightly press this. It just kind of mists over the chain, and then I'll just spin that chain. So I started just about where that master link was. So then next time I see that master link come around, I know that we're good to go. All right, so there we are. Now this stuff kind of hardens up and solidifies a little bit to make that protective coating over this. So I just spin it a little bit, really let it work into that chain, and then with a rag, you know, I'll wipe any little bits that were on our sprocket here, maybe that got on the rim, we'll wipe those off, but I don't ever wipe the chain off with what's on there. Clean up our sprocket. Well, and by golly gosh, I think we're ready to put this thing on the ground so we can tighten that axle bolt up. Give the rim a quick wipe there. I probably should wash this dirty girl, especially now that it has a nice shiny gold chain on it. Fancy. All right, so we're gonna take this bike off the rear stand, pretty similar to how we put it on. First off, make sure your kickstand is down. Absolutely make sure. I can just grab the stand here and I start letting the stand up, and then I'm holding that bike. I set it down real softly, and then I'm gonna reach over with my left hand. I grab that rear set. I'll pull that stand right on out, and then you can let it fall your way against the kickstand. All right, so now we can tighten up that axle bolt all the way, and I kind of like to push forward as I'm doing this. Typically, you know, if I had the ratchet this way and I'm pulling back, you have the potential to pull your axle bolt off of your adjusting studs. So I always want to be pushing this nut, pushing this rear wheel up forward against those adjuster bolts. So with my left hand, I'll just grab the swing arm, grab the bike, get a firm hold on it. And I do not use a torque wrench, you know, of any sort for these axle bolts, because all I'm physically capable of is about 100 foot-pounds of force tops. Oh, baby. That's it. That's 100 or somewhere in the area. All right, and that's a wrap. Well, and so I did make that old chain and sprockets, our new wall art there. Just hung it on a nail, and then I just have that front sprocket just resting in it. Oh, that's kind of a cool piece. Sure, why not? Ooh-wee. Well, and a job like that deserves an ice cold brew. I guess today it's a classic Coors Banquet. Yep. So yeah, our new chain and sprockets is on. Everything looks awesome. Everything fit and worked perfectly. So I guess what time is it? Well, that took me about 2 hours, I guess, to do that, as I was kind of talking to you and explaining everything, which I guess it'll probably take you, you know, about that 2 hours or so as well, if you're watching the video doing that along with it. But yeah, not too bad. You know, there's just a few things that you're gonna need. Obviously, that rear bike stand, the 32mm, you know, axle socket. But other than that, you know, I think every tool that we used was just in our basic tool kit. Well, and the impact gun, I guess I did use the impact gun just because we had a really old sprocket on this bike, which I could have got out my 3-foot breaker bar. I'm sure I could have got it. So hopefully this video helps somebody out. You know, I tried to be as thorough and as detailed as I could. You know, I want this to help somebody who has never done a job or a task like this to their motorcycle. And I want you to feel confident going into this, just having no questions at all. And some of the extra stuff, you know, the extra knowledge that I was blabbing on, the difference between the O-ring and X-ring chain, difference on chain sizes, you know, why we replace the chain and the sprockets at the same time, not just one or the other. You know, all that stuff is good to know. I mean, it's good to know how to do a task, but it's good to know why we do it that way. It helps you be more knowledgeable, and you could share that info with the next person. But yeah, so I'll put all those links to everything that we kind of talked about in the video description. And as far as that exact chain and sprockets that I used, I did get them off Amazon. Those are the exact sprocket sizes and exact chain size in links for a 2007 to 2018 CBR600RR. I guess according to the specs on that chain and sprockets kit, they must have changed the sizes, maybe on the sprocket or maybe on the chain on the years outside of that. But the brand I got of that chain and sprocket should have chain and sprockets for all your different years of CBR600. So I'll put a link to that exact one. But then you can go to Amazon and go to that chain and sprockets, and then at the top, you can just hit visit the store of that seller of that brand, and then within that store, you can just search whatever year bike you're looking for. Even if it's not a Honda, even if it's not a CBR, you know, all of that manufacturer's chains are around that price point, that $80, $90. But yeah, I think that should cover everything for today. So I suppose, like the video if this helped you out, subscribe if you want to see more, and until next time.